The MPA Capstone Project. The Memorandum Introduction. During the Capstone Seminar, you will develop the Capstone Project in stages. Each week you submit a part of the project to your instructor for review and comment. This week, your outline and introduction are due. The purpose of this media lecture is to focus on the Memorandum Introduction section of your Capstone project. The purpose of the Memorandum Introduction is to introduce the project, your client, and your role, and to explain the action forcing event. Here's an example. A note in this example that there is the memorandum format with the heading, so that the memorandum is to an official. It's from the policy and analyst, and note that there's a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is the 5-digit number for the particular student who wrote this, and it identifies the student's role. Note that there's a date and that there's a topic. Here's another example. Note how this memorandum begins with an introduction of the problem. In this case, the problem is cell phone policy for the New York City schools. Here's another example of the introduction. The student identifies herself as a legislative consultant and then explains her assignment in the second paragraph. In the introduction, you have to present the action-forcing event. An action-forcing event is an adverse circumstance, incident, or deadline. It can be recent or impending. It is of potential or actual interest to your client, and it might convince your client that change is needed and that the recommended policy option that you recommend in your study ought to be implemented. So the action-forcing event illustrates the problem that your project is studying. Let's consider some examples of possible action-forcing events. In this table, we distinguish between the event, the underlying problem, and the proposed policy change. For example, an action-forcing event might be a large and disastrous apartment fire. The underlying problem, which would be studied, involves whether fire prevention practices and policies are sufficient and whether it's possible for fire prevention to be improved. The policy change involves the update of the fire codes. That's the policy document that would be changed. So the options, for example, might involve particular updates of the fire codes, which would perhaps introduce sprinklers or change how alarms are deployed, or provide additional escape routes, or other kinds of changes to the fire codes. But you can see the distinction here between the event and the problem and the policy change. In the second example, the event is that funds are embezzled in City Hall. So we have a scandal in which there's been an embezzlement in City Hall. The underlying problem is whether our financial controls are sufficient. And the policy change would be to update the audit policy. Third example would be that for the action-forcing event, that park funds are slashed and services are cut. An event might actually involve, say, people protesting the fact that the funds are cut and that they can't get the services in the parks that they want. The problem then is the need for more park funding, and the policy options might involve different ways of raising revenue for parks. For example, there could be a study of policy about advertising within the parks to raise revenues, or a study about policies for user fees in the parks to raise revenues. And so this is once again, it's illustrating the relationship between an action forcing event, the underlying problem, and policy change that you would be studying. In summary, the purpose of the introduction section is to grab the reader's attention with a dramatic action-forcing event, to set the scene for your policy analysis, to explain the problem to your client, and to do this in no more than 2 single-spaced pages. Thank you.